There are infinite ways to frame a shot. The filmmakers that we have come to know and love force us to look at our world differently. Their wizardry of combining art and science, of architecturally building a shot with lines and shapes, of forced perspective, is the reason we love film. The reason we line up outside of cinemas, and probably the reason why you're watching this video right now. We collectively give abstract meaning to different shapes, lines, and patterns. Vertical and horizontal lines, for example, can indicate a character is trapped or a prisoner in their current lifestyle. Triangles can emphasize power dynamics. Linear framing can show physical separation, and straight lines are used to guide your eyesight. Today, we're taking a look at this year's Academy Award winner for Best Picture. A story about a poor family's plan to con their way into becoming the servants of a rich family, with twists throughout turning it into a spectacular crime thriller. This is the look of Parasite.
진짜 상징적인 거네.
Every single shot drives home visually the vital themes of wealth, disparity, and the myth of class mobility, with every set constructed to be a maze, a puzzle box, and a prison that manipulates us from start to finish and leaves us breathless by the end. For the rich house, the strange events that occur are very much tied to the actual space of that house. So the basic structure of the house was set as I wrote the script, because otherwise it wouldn't have been possible to propel the narrative forward. So while I was writing the script, I sketched out the house and handed it to the production designer, Lee Ha-jun. Almost as important as the actors were the film's settings, two polar opposite homes where virtually all the action takes place. Lee designed each home with parallel front-facing windows, and this is important because we can see the gulf between the two families from the very first shot of them. The poor Kim family have only a morsel of window to let in light. By stark contrast, the rich have a window shaped in the classic widescreen aspect ratio of 2:3:9:1. That giant glass window basically was built in this cinemascope ratio. We designed it like that on purpose so that when people are sitting on the sofa, it almost feels like they're watching a film screen. And for the poor house, the window is longer, and it also gives a sense that this family has no privacy, that anyone can look in and sort of infiltrate their home. Essentially, they're looking through the same window, but they're seeing completely different things. Visually, Parasite starts from the bottom and works its way up. The poor live underground and the rich live above ground, with the line of separation between the classes being the ground itself. When portraying poverty, it's about as on the nose as you can get. The house is dirty, the drunk urinate by their window, and the family is forced to live with very little natural light. Their lack of work has them folding pizza boxes for a living, which take up more space in the Kim's already cramped home. All of these elements are exacerbated by the use of the camera. Looking down on the Kim family is something that Bong and Hong employ throughout the opening of the film, and that only changes when the son of the Kim family becomes the tutor to the richer Parks. Our perspective flips, and we look up at him. Bong still navigates the thin line of presenting neither side as hero or villain. While the rich house may come across as being luxurious, it also feels like an isolated castle. It's this ambiguity which leaves us questioning just who the titular Parasite is. I wanted this film to seem a little more realistic. I was tired of seeing rich people who were always bad and greedy, and poor people who were always nice and helping each other. I was tired of that dichotomy. I think reality is always vague and ambiguous, and good versus evil. There's a very fine line of how those two can be separated. We were reminded of Kurosawa's High and Low, or to use its Japanese title, Heaven and Hell. On the top of the hill is a rich guy, and in the bottom, there's the criminal. Parasite is a film that follows 10 main characters up close, with 10 different characteristics each that need to be captured in the frame. So to capture these at times overcrowded scenes in intimate claustrophobic settings, cinematographer Hong Kyung-pyo opted for the large format Arri Alexa 65. Large format cameras have a significant impact on a filmmaker's use of lenses. For example, using a 50mm lens on a 65mm format camera like this produces a field of view roughly the equivalent of a wide 25mm lens on the regular 35mm format. In other words, the large format allows you to see wider without going wider. Cinematographer Hong Kyung-pyo explains how the lighting itself helped convey the class divide at the heart of Parasite. First, I try to reflect the gap between the rich and the poor in the amount of sunshine. In the rich mansion, on the high ground, you can see the sunlight all day long through the wide windows everywhere. On the other hand, sunlight comes through a small window in the semi-basement house, and can be seen only for a short moment of the day. the sunny area is just as limited as the size of the small window. That's why residents of semi-basement units turn on the indoor light during daytime. So the cinematographer installed the same low-end lighting lamps, greenish fluorescent and tungsten incandescent, used by Korean households in Ki-taek's home. The street lamps outside were given a dim reddish color that he says created a very dull, deadening feeling. Shooting at the Park home, on the other hand, was done in natural light, and only warm tone lighting was used in the interiors. In the end, semi-basement lighting was technical lighting, while the lighting in Park's house was aesthetic lighting. As the Kim family assumes roles as the Park family's employees, their placement in the house notifies the audience of their changing status and the power shift occurring between the families. For example, in Ki-woo's first tutoring session with the daughter, he's situated on the first floor, but once the mother's comfortable around him, he's promoted to teach her in her bedroom, located on the second floor. Thus, the first Kim has moved from the semi-basement, up through the streets, up the staircases into the highest house in the city, and now, the highest part of the house. Or Ki-jung, when hired as an art therapist for the youngest Park, takes charge of the situation and instructs the boy's mother to wait downstairs. The Parks therefore have been demoted to the lower half of the house. Similarly, when halfway through the film the narrative flips, as the plans of the Kim family are dealt a significant blow, the carefully crafted world that surrounds them reflects that. The physical descent reflects the fall from grace of the characters, and so do the camera angles used. Now, from a distant wide lens, our characters are shown to be tiny amongst the gargantuan buildings, staircases, and streets. As they scurry back to their semi-subterranean home, they look like little insects winding their way back down the various staircases to their hellish home life. Speaking of which, staircases are predominant throughout the movie. Both Mr. Park's mansion-like house and Ki-taek's semi-basement house feature several staircases of varying size. Could these perhaps be Bong's nod to Hitchcock? There is a small Easter egg acknowledging him on a bookshelf. Bong Joon-Ho even cites Psycho as an influence, not due to the Bates Motel, but the Bates house itself. While not as rich, Norman Bates' house is also a two-story home with a staircase that leads to secrets lurking underneath. The director told press after the release of the film that he was most inspired by Alfred Hitchcock movies and Korean director Kim Ki-young's 1960 crime drama, The Housemaid. To quote Criterion, The Housemaid is a twisted little tale about a bourgeois family whose lives are thrown into dangerous disarray by the arrival of a live-in domestic. Sound familiar? This cultural commentary through a hugely engaging storyline, morally ambiguous characters, and classic camera movement is Bong Joon-ho's homage to what made him a filmmaker. Now let's look deeper at scenes and see how Bong Joon-ho and Hong Kyung-pyo use blocking of characters, composition of shots, and lines and shapes to advance the themes of the story, reveal character, and create emotion. The original working title of Parasite was decalcomania, a technique in which an image is created on paper and then folded over to form a doubled symmetrical work of art. Symmetry is a common motif in Bong's movies, probably on par with Kubrick for his love of one-point perspective, and this story about a poor family infiltrating and impressing themselves upon the rich could not ask for more of this Bong set piece. But wait, having looked and looked, there isn't really anything symmetrical in the whole movie. Sure, there are scenes that are meant to look close to being symmetrical, and even scenes with reflections that are to the left or to the right of the screen, but not perfectly symmetrical. Perhaps Bong Joon-ho is showing that these two families can never be the same, never feel the same, or exist in the same microcosm. There will always be that smell that lingers, something to prevent the Kims from being part of the Park's world. Perhaps he's showing that, like with the decalcomania, the picture is never truly symmetrical, and life is no perfect fairy tale. Bong's storyboarding gives us a clear indication for how he saw camera moves, almost voyeuristic, with the slight movement of the camera just to nudge your attention from where you think it should be to something else. There were many of these kind of camera movements, which made fewer cuts compared to other feature films. It only has 960 cuts in total. The reason why Parasite is so immersive and rhythmical is because of the harmony of accurate camera work and timing of the editing, which started from the exquisite storyboard. The claustrophobic nature by which Bong films the poor family is another example of his inspired framing to assist with storytelling. When the Kim family crowd their boss from the pizza company, their bodies are nearly spilling out of the frame. This image shows the family's closeness and foreshadows their team-like assault on the Park family. Furthermore, this composition contrasts perfectly with the framing of the Park family, who are often not in the same shot, the same room, or spread out across the cinemascope ratio. Again, the houses themselves come into play with regard to blocking and composition. In the Kim house, the characters are boxed in by shapes and lines, usually crouched into frame under an overhang or with clutter on either side of them. Even the son's walk, from the poor Kim house to the rich Park house, begins with him squeezing out of the claustrophobic alleyway and then into the light, natural open space of the richer world. The story just demanded all those things in terms of blocking. Like if someone is in a certain position, the other character had to spy on them. If someone's coming in, another person had to hide behind a corner. So these very basic spatial relationships between the characters were already established. With composition like this, and knowing the outcome of the film, the movie pays off just as much on repeat viewings. For example, knowing that there's a class divide between the Kim and the Park family, in the scene where Ki-woo meets Young Kyo, Bong frames the pair with a line dividing them. The same line will appear when Ki-taek meets his boss at the tech company. The world of Parasite is a character in itself, and the composition and set design are akin to Kubrick's The Shining in their masterful complexity. The maze of physical spaces also provide us with scope for symbolism, with key visual elements carrying more weight on future viewings. Staircases, hallways, shelves, coffee tables, plants, and doors all provide visual clues that help us work out the intricacies of the plot. Take this shot, for example. Having witnessed the cramped and unsanitary conditions of the Kim house, it's a lot more poignant having the matriarch of the Kim family sitting in an expansive room, experiencing a life she's never known through a frame within a frame. As filmmakers, we are constantly reminded that conventions are made to be changed. Records are there to be broken and lines to be crossed. Whether it was the water that blurred those lines, Bong Joon-Ho with his characters, or Hong Kyung-pyo with the cinematography, for Parasite and the world of cinema, the lines are disappearing. Thanks for tuning into the Hurlbut Academy's look of Parasite. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to let us know in the comments which film we should do the next look of. Click the link below to register at the Hurlbut Academy to go beyond film school and master the art of cinematography.